Right now, somewhere beneath Midtown Manhattan, a man is boiling water on a propane stove inside a plywood shack he built with his own hands. Above him, 25 feet of concrete and frozen earth separate his world from the commuters rushing along the sidewalk in their winter coats. They have no idea he exists. He has no idea what the weather is doing up there. And that is exactly how he likes it. He is not lost. He is not trapped. He chose this. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand why a freezing railroad tunnel beneath one of the richest neighborhoods on Earth can feel safer than a heated building with a bed waiting inside it. Every winter, New York City becomes one of the most dangerous places in America to be homeless. When the wind chill drops below zero and the snow piles up along Park Avenue, the city's unhoused population faces a brutal choice. Sleep on the street and risk freezing to death. Go to a city shelter and risk violence, theft, and conditions that many describe as worse than the streets themselves. Or disappear underground into the vast network of abandoned subway tunnels, old railroad passages, and maintenance shafts that stretch for hundreds of miles beneath the city. Thousands of people choose the third option. They have been choosing it for nearly a century. And the reason isn't desperation. It is something far more unsettling than that. Start with the cold, because the cold is what makes the choice real. This isn't a place where winter is an inconvenience. In January, the temperature in New York regularly drops into the single digits. Factor in wind chill coming off the East River and the Hudson, and the air can feel like -15 or worse. For someone asleep on a park bench in Central Park or huddled in a doorway on the Bowery, that is not discomfort. That is a countdown. Here is how that countdown usually ends. In early 2026, during a single cold snap that lasted about 2 weeks, at least 17 people died on the streets of New York. 13 of those deaths were linked directly to hypothermia. The city declared an enhanced Code Blue protocol and rolled warming buses out to places like the Staten Island ferry terminal in Lower Manhattan. The buses had heat. They had seats. They could have saved every one of those 13 people. And here is the detail that should make your stomach turn. An 82-year-old volunteer out trying to help homeless New Yorkers survive the night discovered that the police officers, the transit workers, and the security guards standing nearby did not even know the warming buses existed. The buses were idling right there at the curb. Nobody had been told. People froze to death within walking distance of the thing built to save them. So when a homeless New Yorker looks at the official safety net, this is what they see. A system that exists on paper and fails on the sidewalk. And that failure is the entire reason the tunnels keep filling up. Because here's what the city would tell you. New York has a legal mandate, unique in the entire country, that guarantees a BD to anyone who asks for one. Walk into a shelter, get a place to sleep. On paper, nobody in the city should ever be cold. But the people who have actually slept in those shelters describe something the mandate never mentions. Overcrowding so constant it never lets up. Violence between residents that is well documented and routine. Theft so frequent that people learn to sleep with their shoes on and their bag wedged underneath their own body. And an intake line that can force you to wait for hours outside in the exact freezing cold the shelter is supposed to protect you from just to get through the door. Now do the math the way a homeless person does it. The street can kill you with cold. The shelter can rob you, hurt you, and still make you wait in the cold to get inside. So what's left? Somewhere dark, somewhere dangerous, but somewhere that's yours. Nobody steals from you while you sleep because you've hidden your camp so well that nobody knows it's there. Nobody wakes you at 5 a.m. and orders you out. You answer to no one. That word, autonomy, is the thing the cold and the shelters can't offer. And as strange as it sounds, it is the single force that has been pulling people underground for almost 100 years. To see how far back that pull goes, you have to return to the last time the city collapsed. When the Great Depression hit in the 1930s and tens of thousands of New Yorkers lost their homes overnight, the disused subway tunnels became a last resort. They weren't comfortable and they weren't safe, but they were dry, they were out of the wind, and they offered the one thing the streets never could: walls. That was the discovery. And once a city learns that its tunnels can hold people, it never forgets. So when the next housing catastrophe arrived, the tunnels were already waiting. The 1980s were brutal in a way that compounded on itself. Reagan-era cuts gutted federal housing programs. Therefore, the supply of affordable homes shrank. At the same time, the mass deinstitutionalization of mental health patients pushed thousands of vulnerable people onto the street with nowhere to go. Then, the crack epidemic tore through what was left. The shelter system buckled under all three at once. Tent cities rose in Tompkins Square Park on the Lower East Side, and when police moved in to clear them, the confrontations turned violent enough to make national news. But clearing a camp does not erase the people in it. They had to go somewhere. And by then, the city had already taught them where. They went down. By the late 1980s, underground communities had formed in subway stations, abandoned rail lines, and maintenance tunnels across Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. Some were tiny, just a few people in a dead-end passage, but others grew into something nobody on the surface was prepared to believe. Something closer to a functioning village, and the largest of them had a name. The Freedom Tunnel is a 2.6-mile Amtrak Railroad tunnel running beneath Riverside Park on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, stretching from 72nd Street all the way up to 124th Street. It was built in the 1930s as part of Robert Moses's expansion of park space for wealthy Upper West Side residents. Trains ran through it for decades, but by the late 1970s, the tunnel fell out of regular use. The tracks went quiet, the lights went dark, and people moved into the dark. By the mid-1980s, the Freedom Tunnel was home to roughly 75 people, scattered in small groups along the walls, inside empty maintenance bunkers, and in shacks built from whatever the city threw away. Scrap plywood, old doors, sheet metal pulled from construction sites, furniture dragged down from dumpsters in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in America. And here is what makes this story flip on you. What visitors found down there was not chaos. It was a society with laws. A well-spoken man named Bernard Isaac, known to everyone underground as the Lord of the Tunnel, helped hold that society together. The rules were short and they were enforced. Don't steal, don't yell. Respect other people's privacy. Don't do anything dangerous, break them, and you would be asked to leave. Nobody appointed Bernard Isaac. No authority gave him that power. The community needed order, so the community created order 25 feet beneath the sidewalks of the wealthiest part of the city. The tunnel even had its own strange beauty. Grates set into the sidewalks of Riverside Park let shafts of natural light pour straight down into the blackness at regular intervals. Graffiti artists, drawn to those columns of light, painted enormous murals along the walls. One artist, Chris Freedom Pape, created some of his most iconic work inside those natural spotlights. His art is where the tunnel got its name. But beauty doesn't keep you alive in January. Survival did. And the way these people solved survival is the part outsiders refuse to believe. Tunnel dwellers ran cables off the electrical outlets deeper inside the Amtrak system, tapping the city's own power grid to pull electricity into their shacks. With electricity came heat, space heaters, hot plates for cooking, refrigerators for storing food. One resident, a Cuban refugee named Carlos, lived down there with working heat, electric light, and insulation packed into the walls of his structure. He told visitors the insulation worked better than they'd expect. that he was genuinely comfortable. He read books, he sold books, he simply wanted to be left alone. Others cooked on propane stoves and shared meals, the way neighbors anywhere share meals. They gathered around fires built in metal barrels, arguing about politics and sports, the same things people argue about on the surface. They kept pets, mostly dogs, though one couple, a Vietnam veteran named Joe and his wife Kathy, kept 20 cats in their section of the tunnel. They watched each other's backs, the way people do when they understand that no one else is going to, and they paid for all of it with the city's garbage. The tunnel's economy ran on aluminum cans collected from trash bins across Manhattan and redeemed at supermarkets for 5 cents apiece. 5 cents sounds like nothing, but a dedicated collector could earn enough to buy food, propane, batteries, and the occasional luxury. Others traded books and salvaged goods pulled off the street. The underground had a working economy, and it was more organized than anyone on the surface was willing to admit. Which raises an obvious question. If this place was so dangerous, so full of disease and violence, the way the city always claimed, then why did the people who actually went down there come back saying the opposite? One filmmaker decided to stop guessing and find out for himself. His name was Mark Singer, a young model living in the East Village in the early 1990s, fascinated by the homeless people he passed on the streets near his apartment. He started talking to them, hanging out with them, sometimes sleeping on the streets himself. When he heard the stories about the tunnels, he had to see them. New Yorkers had warned him the underground would eat him alive, that it was packed with violent criminals and disease. What Singer actually found was a cook who could fry 20 eggs at once when he was wired on amphetamines, a woman who recited poetry in the dark, a man who collected hundreds of books and ran a small lending library from his corner of the tunnel. Singer lived in the Freedom Tunnel on and off for 2 years, and he decided the world needed to see it. The film he made, Dark Days, was shot on 16mm black and white film with a crew made up almost entirely of tunnel residents themselves. They ran the cable for the lighting rigs underground, tapping whatever power they could reach. DJ Shadow scored it, and in 2000, it won 3 major awards at the Sundance Film Festival, the only documentary to pull that off at the time. But Dark Days didn't just capture life underground. It accidentally captured the death of it. Because while Singer was filming, Amtrak made a decision. The Freedom Tunnel was going back into active rail service, which meant every single person living there had to go. The shacks would be bulldozed, the community would be scattered, and for many of these people, this tunnel was the only stable home they'd had in years. One resident had been living underground for 25 years. He was about to be evicted from the only address he trusted. What happened next is the reason this story isn't just sad. Singer and the photographer Margaret Morton went to the Coalition for the Homeless and refused to let these people simply be swept from one invisible corner of the city to another, which is exactly what happens in almost every encampment clearance. They fought, and the fight worked. The residents secured housing vouchers from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and many of the people in Dark Days moved into real apartments for the first time in years. The final scenes of the film show them gleefully tearing apart the shacks they'd lived in, grinning as they load their belongings into moving vans. For once, the ending was good. So you'd assume that's where it ends. Everyone gets a home, the tunnel goes quiet, the story closes. Except some of them went back. One former resident, a man named Bob, had been a short-order cook before addiction brought him underground. A heart attack forced him above ground in 1994, and he tried public housing. Within months, he was back in the tunnel. An apartment, 4 walls, a door that locked, and he chose the dark again. A volunteer at the Holy Apostle Soup Kitchen in Manhattan named Audrey Lombardi watched this same thing happen over and over. Her explanation is hard to shake. After enough years on the street, she said, people lose faith in humanity so completely that the hurt and the loneliness become the steadiest things they have. The tunnel does not just become a home, it becomes the only thing they still trust. Sit with that, because it's the real engine of this entire story. This was never only about cold weather and a place to hide from it. It's about what happens to a human being after the city fails them so many times that a plywood shack in a pitch-black railroad tunnel starts to feel like the safest place in New York. And if you think the Freedom Tunnel was the end of underground New York, the numbers are about to tell you something much worse. Today, an estimated 2,000 or more people live beneath the streets of this city. That number is a guess, and it's a guess for a chilling reason. The entire point of tunnel living is to be uncountable. These people don't check into shelters. They don't appear in census data. They exist in abandoned subway stations, old utility corridors, heating shafts, and stretches of tunnel that most New Yorkers don't know are there. And the space available to disappear into is staggering. The subway system alone has 472 stations, and many of them hide unused platforms, sealed-off passages, and forgotten lower levels that haven't seen official foot traffic in decades. That is not infrastructure trivia. That is 472 potential front doors for a population the city cannot see. They move under cover of darkness specifically to avoid being detected and evicted. They build their shelters deep enough that casual exploration will never reach them. Most of the time, the only proof they exist surfaces by accident, when a construction crew breaks open a section of tunnel sealed for years and finds mattresses, cooking equipment, clothing hung on a makeshift line. As one researcher put it, if people are still living underground in New York, they have gotten extremely good at not being found. Winter is still when the stakes are highest, and the tunnels answer the cold in a way the street never can. The temperature underground holds steadier, rarely crashing to the lethal extremes that kill people on the surface. The concrete walls hold ambient heat from the city's own infrastructure. Steam pipes run through certain sections, and experienced tunnel dwellers know every warm pocket by heart. Some passages sit close enough to active subway lines that the friction of passing trains and the body heat of thousands of daily commuters keep the air above freezing even in January. The warmth you generate just by riding the train to work is keeping someone alive below your feet, but the tunnels collect their own ways to kill you. Rats, standing water, darkness so total you cannot see your own hand. Live rail lines where one wrong step is final. During the filming of Dark Days, one tunnel dweller was struck and killed by a train. And then there's the violence, because criminals understand something precise about tunnel residents. They have no one to call. A decomposing body was discovered in the Freedom Tunnel in 2006, stuffed into an old baby stroller. It had been there for months before Amtrak workers found it. That is what it costs to be invisible. And still, every winter, people choose it, because the official alternative keeps proving them right. During that 2026 cold snap, the fire department fielded 5,700 calls related to cold exposure in a matter of days. At one point, there were not enough ambulances for 300 people who needed one. The city announced that outreach workers had placed over 1,100 people in shelters, and that number sounds like a rescue until you learn how it's counted. Each night is logged as a separate placement. One person sheltered for 5 nights becomes 5 placements. The triumphant statistic is the same handful of people, counted again and again. The math looks like salvation. The frozen sidewalks tell a different story. If you're finding this useful, hit subscribe. I cover hidden worlds and the systems that create them every single week. Now, there's one detail in this story that goes past survival altogether, and it's the detail that should genuinely unsettle you. These tunnel communities weren't only hiding from the cold, they were building something the surface couldn't. Think about what actually happened down there. Bernard Isaac kept order with no badge and no authority, simply because the community decided order had to exist. Residents enforced their own laws with no police because they understood that survival underground runs entirely on trust. They shared resources, they guarded each other's belongings, they formed friendships that outlasted decades. They built, in the dark, the exact social fabric the city above them kept failing to provide. Mark Singer admitted that before going underground, he had quietly lumped all homeless people together as hopeless. Living among them dismantled that completely. He found humor, intelligence, and a defiant, stubborn dignity. One resident told him something Singer never forgot. The man said, "Maybe I live like a mole, but I'm not an animal." That line is what makes this story so hard to put down, because the city of New York, with a budget over $100 billion and a skyline crowded with luxury condominiums, still has not solved the problem of people freezing to death in January. The shelters fail, the outreach fragments, and the warming buses nobody knew about sit there as the perfect monument to a system that exists on paper and dies in practice. So the tunnels remain, not as an urban legend, not as a curiosity, as the coldly logical answer to a city that has spent nearly 100 years leaving thousands of its own residents with nowhere else to go. Jennifer Toth, the journalist who wrote the first major book about New York's underground population in 1993, described meeting people who had built entire lives beneath the streets. Families, friendships, morning routines. People who woke up, made coffee on a hot plate, tidied their space, and went out to earn a living, exactly like everyone walking above them. The only real difference was the address. So the next time you walk down a sidewalk in Manhattan and feel that warmth rising up through a subway grate, stop for a second and remember where that warmth is going. 25 feet below your shoes, someone may be depending on it to live through the night. If you want to understand more about the people the system has decided not to see, click the video on screen now.